Hello and welcome to another episode of NSE FinViz powered by CNBC TV18. Today we're at the sprawling R&D Centre in Faridabad of India's flagship oil company, Indian Oil. Indian Oil's Research and Development Centre is India's foremost commercial centre of research excellence in the areas of lubricants, oil refining, fuel additives, engine testing, material sciences and environmental sciences. Located on a sprawling 65-acre campus in Faridabad on the outskirts of the national capital, Indian Oil's R&D Centre plays a key role in supporting the business interests of the corporation by developing economical, environmentally and socially responsible technology solutions. The centre is also focused on cutting-edge research in the areas of nanotechnology, petrochemicals and polymers, coal gasification and liquidation, and gas to liquid. Focusing on our theme for the series, NSE FinViz visited the Indian Oil Research and Development Centre in Faridabad to gauge thoughts and notions of young professionals on investment and financial planning.
As a scientist at Indian Oil R&D Centre, investment means knowledge, investing in knowledge, because that pays the maximum dividend. But if you ask in financial terms, I guess investment is creation of wealth. You put money in the hope of making more money.
Presently, investments are in real estate. Recently purchased a house and paying EMIs for it, and building a corpus through Provident Fund. But I plan to invest in diversified mutual funds in near future through SIP route, and will like to explore the further possibilities on that.
First of all, I would like to have more knowledge, to be more knowledgeable after this program about those sectors, particularly equities and mutual funds. What are the factors to look at before investing in this section? Because I'm not that much knowledgeable in that. And also how to diversify my investment portfolio in the different sectors.
To be very frankly, my peers and my elder colleagues influenced me regarding all the investments actually. I talk to those persons whom I feel much more knowledgeable about investment, and I follow their advice. But I never took any advice from the financial advisor till date actually.
Well, we're now joined by our two very special experts. We have Mr. Harshvardhan Rungta, who's a certified financial planner with Rungta Securities, and we have Firoz Aziz, who's the Director Investments at Anand Rathi Wealth Management. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Firoz, first question to you. When we want to invest, youngsters when they want to invest, it's usually we take the advice of a friend or somebody from the family, usually the parents, But suppose now, what is the right way to start investing? What are some of the first 2-3 baby steps that they should be taking correctly?
I think that's a very common seen practice, that you take advice from your relative, your family friend or your parents, which is very good from a input perspective. But I think personal finance and trying to invest yourself is something which is very clearly not one size fits all. Everybody has a customized and a personal touch to his investments. So initially starting your own investments is one of the most critical thing. To do that, I think you need to make sure that you understand a few steps which somebody should do. The most important thing for you to be very committed to your investment is setting yourself goals, right? The goals are very important. So you set yourself, what money are you looking at, right? And if you have some goals like retirement, child's education, if you have a child, of course, child's marriage, could be your first home, your first car. If you have defined your goals, is one baby step, first step you should do. The next thing is try and figure out what is going to be the value of the goal when you actually arrive at that stage when you're going to meet it. So factoring in inflation and not falling short when you actually go to meet the goal, and the goal has become twice more expensive and you're falling short. So that's the second step. Then after your goals are clearly defined and you understand what money you will need in the future, trying to allocate money across different asset classes depending on your intrinsic nature of risk profile and stuff would be the third step. And the fourth step is trying to mitigate any risk which will be due to some unforeseen events. Could be some unforeseen event with respect to life, with respect to health, with respect to some contingency requirement. These are the 4 steps somebody should follow. And then the 5th step would be to revisit the goals.
Harsh, when we talk about goal setting, which is a really important bit, give us some examples of goals, because there are short-term, mid-term, long-term goals. So what are some ways for people to set goals?
Well, the first part is very clear. You need to start from what is going to come immediately to you. The first part is you have certain emergency requirements, which could be in the form of medical emergencies, which could be in the form of job, loss of job. So you need to provide, or you're changing jobs. Okay, so there is a waiting period. Then you may have unexpected expenses, which could be in the form of renovating a house. We see calamities just wiping out your house completely, and then you need to redo that. So there are some goals which you can there are certain requirements rather which you need to provide for. So these are called emergency funds. Now typically from personal finance perspective, you should hold about 3 months of your monthly expenses in a deposit which is easily liquidable. So it could be a fixed deposit, it could be liquid funds. So these are basically to take care of unexpected and unplanned for expenses. Then you look at slightly longer goals, which could be your children's education, which could be some a holiday that you wish to take. You can predefine those periods. You can say that after 5 years probably I will go in for a holiday. I need an overseas holiday. So you can predefine those periods and start saving for them.
Okay.
Then comes much longer. I mean, obviously you talk about retirement. There's something in this uncertain world. If there is any certainty, it's retirement.
Okay, right.
You are going to retire at one day.
Firoz, when we talk about investments, financial planning, there is an important bit called asset allocation. It's a term that's thrown out in the newspapers, on channels. People talk about asset allocation. What does that mean, and why is it important first?
Right. I think asset allocation is one of the most commonly used nomenclature in the financial sector, at least when it comes to people's investments. What does that mean? It seems more sophisticated than it is. If you identify all the assets and how much percentage of your money, current money and future potential income, do you envisage to allocate between these assets, is called asset allocation. For example, the basic assets which are there could be equity, debt, commodities, real estate. These are the 4 most commonly used assets. What you should already, before you earn your money, the next 10 years money, next 5 years money, you should already have a plan around how much money will go in each of these places. That's called asset allocation. It is a very important thing because that will actually dictate the future of your total maturity value. There has been a lot of survey and backtesting done that it is not very important on which stock you buy, when you buy. For example, if you look at equity, what is more important is how much of equity do you buy, how much of debt do you buy. So the returns are more or less dependent on how much do you allocate between this and not what you exactly buy and when you buy.
Well, equity is a really important part of an asset class. It's an important asset class that people should invest in. But what are ways for them to get into equity? Because we generally 2 types of people, one who are new, who are just wanting to get into the equity, and the other is people who might be regularly in equity, who are monitoring the stocks and stuff like that. So what's your advice on how's the way to get into equity and get benefits from equity?
Well, there are different forms to invest into equities. The first being obviously, assuming that an individual is not an expert on markets, what he would do is, give his money to an expert, okay, who does invest into market, does research over in the market as a living, for a living. So which is mutual funds. You could start investing, give your money to mutual funds. Mutual funds will then in turn invest into the right companies which need to be, which are shortlisted by them.
Right.
Now within the mutual fund space, there are about 250 equity schemes. Now how do you go about choosing which scheme do you want? So there is some bit of work that an investor should do. He should put in his own mind and just try and read a little bit about what the scheme is going to do for it. So there are different categories within equity. There is one category which invests into only large cap companies. Now what are large cap companies? Large cap companies are the companies which have a market capitalization of 10,000 crores and above. So IOC being one of them. Okay, then there are mid and small cap companies. So mid cap companies are the companies which have a market capitalization of 2,500 crores up to 10,000 crores. And then there are companies below 2,500 crores. So there are different categories within equity funds. One, it says that we will invest only into large cap funds. So that forms probably your core portfolio. If there are, you're beginning, you will start with companies which are well established and then work your way through different capitalization. So, first basic SIP would probably be into a large cap fund. Then you move on to a mid cap and a combination of a large and a mid cap.
You're watching NSE FinViz powered by CNBC TV 18. It's time for a very short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching NSE FinViz powered by CNBC TV 18. Firoz, we spoke to a lot of them earlier, and a couple of them were interested in investing in gold. So now gold is, besides the physical form, gold is also available in the electronic form. So just tell us a little bit on how people can invest in gold now.
Actually, like it used to happen in the past, where there used to be fewer options for somebody to explore into an asset class. The methods of participating in different assets has gone up dramatically. So is the case with gold. Gold earlier used to mean jewelry, then it graduated to gold bars, gold bricks, gold coins, then it went another step ahead, and we have tried as an industry to convert gold from a physical asset to a financial asset. In that endeavor to convert it, there are two different instruments which got evolved. One is called an exchange traded fund. Okay, don't be too bogged down by the nomenclature, it looks a little more complex again. Exchange traded fund, abbreviated as ETF, is nothing but a mechanism to buy gold in whatever small quantities you want to buy, even 1,000 rupee, which means maybe a 1/3 a gram. You can buy 1/3 gram of gold without any transactional cost. So that's called an ETF. An ETF can be bought on the stock exchange. If you have a trading account, you just tell your broker, please buy me this ETF. He will say, do you have 1,000 rupees in your account? He will be buying gold for you, even at amounts like 1,000 rupees, right? So it could be ETFs. Now what happened was, ETFs didn't have a feature where you could put money on a monthly basis. That was the biggest challenge. So there came another thing called the gold funds, which used to combine a lot of ETFs, and you wrap ETFs, 3-4 ETFs, and make a gold fund. There you can give an instruction to an asset management company saying that har mahine or every month buy myself 2,000 rupees, and automatically money will get debited from your bank account, and 2,000 rupees of gold, worth gold, at whatever price it would be on that particular day, will be credited to your favor. These two investments have actually monetized gold in such an extent that it can be bought in second decimal grams, which was not possible.
Harsh, real estate is another very important or close to heart asset class for the Indians. But there are also, it's a big ticket size, so people feel a little hesitant or are unable to invest so much in real estate. But there are people that talk about, let me put a down payment on a property, and the EMI that I have to pay on that property, I'll offset with the rent that I'm earning from that property. Is that a good call? Is that a good thing to do? What's your take on that?
Well, investing into property has to be answered separately.
Okay.
Investing with a thought that the EMI will be taken care by the rent, I don't think it's a smart thing to do, because the rental yield on any property is about a 3% maximum, on a higher side I'm saying, on a residential property. Commercial will be much higher, but commercial getting loans is difficult. So if you're talking about a residential property, the EMI is, if you to look at the loan would be at least a 10.5%. Okay, and 20% down payment is what you have to do. So on 80% you're paying 10.5%. And on 100% you're getting maximum 3%. Your EMIs and the rents will never be equal.
Okay.
There is always going to be a gap which you will have to fund from your own side. Now there is where the prudence of personal finance comes into. If it fits into your asset allocation, yes, it's a great asset. But if it does not fit into your asset allocation plan, then I don't think you should be venturing into taking such a jump with blocking, and you're actually blocking a large part of your money into these EMIs, and invariably we've seen that people are not left with any money to invest in any other asset class once you take an housing loan. Investing for now answering the question, if you need to invest for into real estate for self consumption, yes, you're excused to even go a little overboard and have an weightage on in real estate.
So by self-consumption, again, just to clarify, you mean to get your own house, your
the first house? Yes, the first house. What I mean by first house is, you may buy a house in your native place, but live in Delhi. That is still considered first house. I'm not saying self-consumption does not mean that you have to live in that house. Own one house as your basic requirement, your food, clothing, shelter, that we talk about. So having the first house, you're excused to go overboard. But if you're looking at from a purely investment perspective, then I don't think matching the rents with EMI is a good idea.
Firoz, let's talk about inflation, because inflation is that little mouse that slowly eats away on your investment. I've heard about the government wanting to introduce something called an inflation index bond. What is that? Is that good sense to buy that?
People, from a psychological perspective, started running into assets which are perceived to be inflation mitigants. Gold, people think, is a very good inflation hedge. That's why people of India started consuming gold, and that meant bringing gold from outside, because it's a global asset. So that automatically meant that we were spending so many rupees to buy so much of gold. So Government of India has introduced inflation index, which tells you that if inflation goes up, the bond which you buy, the inflation bond, inflation adjustment bond, the return of that will also go up. So if inflation goes to 10, you will start earning 12% in that bond. Inflation comes down to 4, now you will earn only 6%. So 2% more than inflation, for example. So that's an inflation adjustment bond. It's a very good tool to not be worried that your money is losing value, because it's now floating with inflation. Inflation goes down, the return on the bond comes down. If inflation goes up, the return on the bond also goes up. That's an inflation bond. It's a very good investment to make.
It's time for a short break on NSE FinViz powered by CNBC TV 18, and after this break, the audience puts forward their questions to our experts. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back. Welcome back, you're watching NSE FinViz powered by CNBC TV 18. It's now time to go over to the audience as they put forth their questions for our experts.
In what assets we should invest so that we can have the maximum return over and above the inflation?
If you combine and do a proper asset allocation, which will have a composition of equity, debt and some precious metal, has a good potential of beating inflation as an overall portfolio. So what should be the ideal mix? If your time frames are greater than 8-10 years on some of the goals like retirement, which gives you enough time, then an allocation of 50-60% to equity and a 20-30% on debt and a 20% on precious metal. This combination has over periods of time seen that has beaten inflation by a reasonable margin of at least generating 2-3% more than inflation, or even better. So this combination as a portfolio should help you beat inflation.
What should be the optimum allocation of investment in terms of percentage between large caps, mid caps and small caps?
Well, see, it entirely depends on your own risk profile and your own preferences. We've seen people who have even 50% into mid caps and they don't prefer large caps. But however, my own personal view, I am more in favor, or I'm a fan of large cap funds, because if I have to, what at the end of the day I'm looking at returns. If a large cap fund gives me that relatively stable returns, what I mean by relatively is when I compare it with mid cap and small cap companies. So if they give me returns like an index, I mentioned index gives you 17% returns if I've looked at since inception. Index is a large cap fund. So if it's giving me 17%, I'm happy. At the same time, I also learned that there are certain few mid-cap funds which have given 22% returns. But my irony is, I do not know which is that fund going to be. I look at historic data, but it need not be that fund is going to give me in future. So the answer is, if I had my choice, 80-90% would have been to large caps. But however, that may not apply to you, because your preference is there are some very good companies in the mid-cap segment as well, which have a potential to grow. So you would divide, with a major portion into large caps. Say if I were the one, I would have designed a portfolio to be at least 50-60% in large caps, and the residual part in mid caps, and then even lesser in the smaller caps.
I just wanted to ask something about disinvestments by the government firms. So is it a lucrative investment plan for an individual to invest in these bonds sold by the government PSUs like BHEL?
There are two types of bonds these PSUs currently are issuing. There is one which is the tax-free bonds, which are very, very lucrative because they have a potential of giving you almost about 8.5 to 8.75% net of tax, because there's no tax on them, right? So it's as good as getting a 12% fixed deposit from a good PSU. If you assume that you are on a marginal tax rate of the highest bracket of 30%. So tax-free bonds which have been flogged in the market for the last couple of months are very, very attractive options. It is to die for. It's a screaming buy, those tax-free bonds. Getting 8.5, 8.75% is as good as getting 11, 12%, not from an NBFC, but as good as a PSU, good rated PSU banks, PSU firms.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you, experts, for being here. And thank you so much for having us here. Thank you so much.
The show was really great. It has enlightened us about the various options before us as beginners to invest and to begin our life in a better way, as we see to purchase property and invest in housings and get maximum returns from our minimum deposits.
Personal view, we do not mostly focus on this financial investment. Either we put in FD or which fixed deposit so that we get definite returns. So these kind of today, like from the session I have especially learned ki rather putting in the fixed this thing for a long term, if we invest on shares and all, it will be very useful.
That's all the time we have this week on NSE FinViz, powered by CNBC TV18, and we hope that we've been able to help the young scientists and young employees at Indian Oil's R&D Center to secure a financially stable future for themselves. From the entire team, many thanks for watching.